Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 650 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and this does serve as your AEW WrestleDream 2024 Ultimate Preview. But not only that, we will be breaking down everything that happened across NXT and AEW this week. Before we even get into that, allow me to remind you, in the podcast feed, we have your WWE Bad Blood 2024 instant analysis and your WWE episode for the week, where we discuss Kevin Owens attacking Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins and CM Punk going face-to-face in a preview, most likely, of WrestleMania 41, AJ Styles getting injured, and everything else in the world of WWE. You do not want to miss that episode. Now, this show, it's probably going to sound decently normal to all of you, but I got to tell you, the Silver King is taping this as a hurricane. Hurricane Milton is bearing down on the state of Florida. Luckily, I am on the East Coast, so we should be able to get this show done and uploaded and everything okay. But the weather is getting bad, so we're going to run through this as quickly as we possibly can while still being comprehensive and, of course, previewing AEW WrestleDream. But I will tell you straight off the top, I do have some particular thoughts on the build of that show. And, you know, at the end, we give you a pre-show expectation grade. There's also a conversation that we have when it comes to AEW. Is it worth spending $50 for that card? And you may find my take on that question interesting later in this show. We're not going to waste any more time off the top. Allow me to remind you, the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about the fire.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast and follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news analysis highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also vote in our pre and post show polls by following us on Twitter at Getting Overcast. We will do those before and after AEW WrestleDream this coming Saturday. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well. You know the deal. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audio to every major TV show. Obviously, we didn't do that for NXT and Dynamite this week. Both were on Tuesday. We were taping the show Wednesday. That didn't make sense. But otherwise, instant reaction audio to every major show and exclusive news analysis posts on Friday. Get it all. buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Now, obviously, the main event of this show, the end of the program, is going to be your AEW WrestleDream Ultimate Preview. So as always, or as usual, I should say, we're going to start with NXT off the top. We're going to do things a little bit different, though. First, we're going to talk about NXT. Then we're going to go over the ratings for NXT and AEW Dynamite, which went head-to-head for 1 hour on Tuesday night. AEW got moved, of course, because of the MLB playoffs. So we will discuss that between both brands, and then we'll talk AEW, and then, of course, your AEW WrestleDream Ultimate Preview. There will be timestamps in the episode description, so you can skip around between everything. As always, I hope you listen to the entire show. So kicking off with NXT, Trick Williams opened the show from the Factory in St. Louis, which really was this cool-ass venue, exactly the type of place NXT should run when it rarely tours for TV. Wesley interrupted from the upper deck of the crowd, saying he's shed some dead weight. He's ready to become a Triple Crown champion. Williams called him light skin, which was so unexpected that it did make me chuckle. Wes replied that Trick ain't it, and he'd leave him in the dust just like his old partner did. Just then, Jey Uso randomly entered out of nowhere. They got the crowd doing both of their catchphrases, and then they kind of just left. The segment wasn't much of anything, but it was a super hype start to the show to get the energy level up. And the venue had such strong vibes, even better than last week in Chicago, despite that having 4 times as many people as this show. Again, this individual venue, the Factory, NXT should at least come back once a year. And they should really be finding venues like this across the country to do shows because, man, it was hype and it made NXT feel special, way different than the WWE Performance Center. Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill, and Kalani Jordan fought Fatal Influence. This came after the opener. There was a cool moment where 5 title holders were in the ring all at once. Jay and, of course, Trick being the other ones. It still makes no sense that Fallon Henley is out there looking like a cowpoke with her partners all dressed up. The faces wore matching lavender gear. Jade got a really nice hot tag, including a choke slam. Lonnie hit a cool X Factor DDT and a moonsault outside into nothing. Nyx caught Bianca with her Pele kick finisher for a near fall, but Bianca basically countered a Shining Wizard into a flapjack before combining with Cargill for their finisher. Lonnie added one of a kind, and they got the win. This was like 15 minutes, twice as long as the entirety of women's wrestling on Raw, all in the first half hour of NXT. And as I suspected last week, Lonnie really shined alongside Bianca and Jade. Her confidence level was high. This match also went way harder than expected. They all delivered. Obviously, a funny note that Cargill finally wrestled an NXT match after everyone, including yours truly, said she should have began her WWE career there. Jade's never going to be amazing in the ring, obviously, but she has more than held her own recently, and she is smoother than ever. I'm not saying she's smooth. I'm saying she's smoother than she has been before. Working in a tag has certainly helped her. I'm not really sure what will happen when she ultimately goes singles and needs to carry a match herself, but there is clear improvement, and that should be commended. The faces celebrated their win backstage only for Metaphor to confront them, saying they wanted a shot at the titles. Bianca and Jade were not set to back down from a challenge. They never are, but they said Metaphor would have to come to them. They invited them over to SmackDown for a title match on Friday. Nice little segment. Curious as to whether this was always the plan or it was an alteration to close the loop on this storyline, just given it seemed like plans changed for NXT in St. Louis. The challenge also rings a little bit hollow because Bianca and Jade are already defending against Damage Control this coming Monday. That said, clearly they were going to retain against Metaphor anyway, so I'm not sure it matters that much. This is going to be interesting, seeing them on the main roster. Lash Legend should be fine, I think, but I'm not totally positive Jakara Jackson is like ready for prime time. We will find out on Friday. Sexy Red was performing her straight up garbage track when Ethan Page interrupted, which was a babyface move as far as I was concerned. He was angry that she interrupted him on Raw, saying NXT is falling apart in just 1 week without him as champion. Page said he should be wrestling Randy Orton. He demanded his rematch with Trick. Javon Evans interrupted, knocked him out of the ring before dancing with Sexy, preceding the match. Look, I know Sexy hits the demo that NXT wants in particular, but is she actually bringing viewers to the show? I mean, look, her music is just trash. I saw someone recently compare her to Lil' Kim and Trina. She wishes she had 1/10 of their talent or charisma or ability. Let's just be honest about what we're talking about here. Orton fought Evans. Orton backstage asked for Axiom to evaluate Javon's speed, so that obviously split them a little bit. It was a fun segment. This main event of the show, Randy was impressed with Javon's speed early, but he outmaneuvered him multiple times. Evans got destroyed with the announce table drop, so Orton appeased fans by doing it thrice more. Javon got a springboard clothesline. Randy caught a springboard cutter, hitting a snap power slam. Evans got spiked on the draping DDT, but super kicked Orton as he geared up for the RKO. Javon then hit his double jump springboard cutter for a 2.95, let's call it, false finish. Unfortunately, coming out of that, Evans rushed the actual finish of the match, and they botched what was supposed to be a springboard tornado RKO counter. So once that completely missed, Orton picked him up, hit a quick RKO, and got the win. It seemed way, way, way too convoluted and ambitious to be executed more than, 10% of the time at best. I just wish they went with something simpler and easier to execute, because it was a sour note to end a match that had pretty high expectations. And you knew they were going to do something special at the end, but they tried to do literally a 10 out of 10 instead of just doing a 9 out of 10, which could have been achieved in a far easier manner. It was very much an eyes bigger than your stomach type of spot. But what was actually the coolest part of the match happened after the bell. Orton picked Evans up, and you could visibly see Javon like depressed and in his own head, and he grabbed Randy kind of by the shoulder. He goes, "I'm so sorry. So sorry, bro." And Orton replied, "It's all right. You're the fucking man," and raised his arm. That was a really sweet moment right there. And I'm sure it's exactly what Evans needed to kind of boost his confidence in that situation. Certainly a different reaction than Randy gave Kofi Kingston back in the day. Stupid. Can't say this match fully lived up to expectations because Mine were legitimately sky high, but at the same time, thinking back on it, I'm not sure it would have made sense for a 44-year-old Orton to go all out in front of less than 2,000 people for a rookie. The false finish, was razor thin. That boosted Javon. That was great. And just working together, I'm sure, was an incredible experience for him. It was also a strong main event for NXT, even if it was probably only the third best match on the night. Still, super cool to see Orton in NXT. Super cool to see him get to do that. Ava later laid down the law with Ethan and Wes, setting a number one contenders match with the winner fighting Trick at Halloween Havoc. Then she added Javon to make it a triple threat given his performance. This is a tough prediction to a degree. A third match against Paige, a second match against Evans, both would be repetitive, kind of predictable. However, it is easy to see Trey Miguel running in and costing Wes the match here, preventing him from getting a title shot. So I really have no idea how this will go. I'll lean with Wes, thinking maybe Trey actually interferes in the title match instead of the number one contendership. But I don't think any of the three are really that interesting of challengers. Wes is the most interesting, but he also has the easiest out when it comes to being taken out of the triple threat. Julia was being interviewed backstage when there was a knock on the door that interrupted her. She said, "Hello, my old friend," and then left to talk to that person. Roxanne Perez came out for a promo with Vic Joseph randomly quoting Nelly on her way to the ring. She put over her title defense and said an old friendship is reigniting as they focus on making fans cry when their new favorites fall. Cora Jade obviously came in angry that everyone's been putting over the NXT women's division, saying it's the best in the world. But when they do that, they leave her name out of the conversation. She said her interference to help Roxy wasn't planned, and Perez deserves to be champion because she's becoming the woman she always knew she could be. Roxy agreed as Julia entered. Cora taunted her, so Julia turned around, and Stephanie Vaquer made her debut for a four-way brawl that they obviously won. The faces grabbed the NXT title simultaneously, clearly setting their sights for the championship. This was a cool enough debut for Vaquer. Probably would have been better without the Titantron appearance from 2 weeks ago. That way it could have been even more unexpected. Roxy was fine on the mic. Cora was pretty robotic and scripted. Not like she's had many reps of late, so hopefully with time she improves. Tagging Julia and Stephanie when neither speaks English fluently, it's obviously going to limit what can be accomplished in like a debut situation. But there's enough storyline with Roxy and Cora to carry it for now, and Vaquer did look super badass here. Ren Sinclair backstage decided she would show Vaquer what the NXT women's division is all about. NQCC came across Lexis King, who was still obsessed over Oro Mensah cheating to beat him. King asked Charlie Dempsey for a match suggestion where neither guy can cheat, and Dempsey started to bend his ear about some English rounds match. The segment kind of cut off. Now, I hope Vaquer gets a more thorough introduction next week so fans actually understand her talent and experience before she actually fights Sinclair. That match is going to happen next week, but I hope there's a video package or a promo or something from Stephanie that precedes that. It would really be a shame if WWE goes Titantron, surprise appearance, match, with nothing else provided by means of building her up. There's no question that her debut and obviously the forthcoming introduction of Delta, that's piling talent on top of talent in this division. And it's really wild how stacked it's going to be by the end of the month. The other thing that I found interesting coming out of this is Vic Joseph multiple times called her Vaquer. That's what I've been saying on this show. That's how I believe her name is supposed to be pronounced. In the backstage segment with Sinclair and NQCC, they kept calling her Vaquer, like Steve Kerr. So then it confused me again because I was like, well, maybe I've been getting it wrong this whole time, and maybe Vic Joseph is getting it wrong as well. I've listened to YouTube videos. I've heard her say her own name, and it kind of on different occasions has come across differently. Someone needs to get me this pronunciation so I say it the correct way every single time on the podcast. I'll see what happens as NXT unfolds. I'm sure if Vic said it wrong, they'll correct him next week. I also think it's most likely that Ren and NQCC said it wrong, and it's actually Vaquer, as we've been saying. But I digress coming out of that. Speaking of Delta, there was a second part to her video package that debuted last week. This week, it showed her destroying four, warlord women in a barren wasteland of the Australian Outback Roadway or whatever. Got to see her face and everything this time, so it's no longer a teaser. She kind of looked like an early Rhea Ripley variant, if that makes sense. And I laughed to myself that she's already getting parking lot reps ahead of her first appearance at the WWE Performance Center. Men's North American Championship was on the line. Obafemi defending against Tony D'Angelo. The family was all ringside as Tony took an apron chokeslam. Stacks threw a crowbar in the ring. D'Angelo denied it. Femi countered a spinebuster clothesline, both of them over the top rope, before chopping Tony on the apron. He cheesed the family, Oba did, shoving the guys, and Adriana Rizzo also fell as like collateral damage there. That, of course, pissed off D'Angelo, leading to a form tackle, a drive into the steel steps, and an overhead suplex ringside, plus a spear inside. Femi actually came back with a claymore and a chokeslam. D'Angelo hit 2 German suplexes, but Femi collapsed after his toss slam. Oba went for a powerbomb through the announce table, but Tony countered for a spinebuster through it, adding another in the ring for a false finish. D'Angelo looked dejected. Femi quickly sat up, enraged. He choked him, ready for the pop-up powerbomb, I presume, but D'Angelo countered him down and folded him over for the surprise 1-2-3 to win the North American Championship. This match went, I would say, 14 minutes is the count I had, and I was at pretty close to 4 stars, A-, right on the border between 3.75 and 4, but this was a pretty damn good match, all things considered. The family went wild celebrating. The crowd popped huge for Tony, despite liking Oba plenty and cheering for him at points during the match. This ended a 33-0 undefeated streak on TV for Femi, and it was at least booked, I would say, in a reasonable fashion where one could believe D'Angelo beat him in this manner. I still disagree with the decision, as I said last week when previewing the match, because there's really just nowhere for Oba to go unless he's fighting for the main title, which Trick just won back, so you're not going to switch it anytime soon. I also felt the random 3-week crisis of confidence storyline was kind of jammed into too short of a window to really sell it. Consider the Sami Zayn storyline ahead of WrestleMania. That got like 2 months of build, and even that felt rushed. Doing this in less than half the time, it made it feel like this decision was one that was maybe changed or recently decided upon for one reason or another. Either that or they just thought it was enough time, and I disagree, which is certainly possible. There are silver linings to this for me, though. First, getting the title off of Femi now allows for it to change more regularly. That freshness is badly needed in NXT. Second, D'Angelo now feels like a real deep character as opposed to the caricature that he was previously. I'm still not sure this gimmick's ever going to work on the main roster, but this is a pretty substantial tweak from what he was, and that was a pretty substantial tweak from where he debuted with NXT 2.0. So if the character keeps evolving, then maybe it will work on the main roster sooner than later. I also, shame on me, totally forgot to say this right on top.
Big meaty man slapping meat. That's what I want.
I mean, we got a meat-filled
Banger.
here. I am glad that they reinforced the ring post because, gentlemen, the beef was flying on Tuesday night.
Reinforce the ring post. The beef's going to be flying tonight, gentlemen.
I mean, sometimes you just need meat.
I need some meat. Yeah.
So it was a fantastic match. It was definitely the best match on the show. And like I said, B+, A- right on that border. Super, super fun and something that you should go and watch if you don't normally watch NXT and you're waiting to hear what I tell you to watch. So go ahead and find it. Tag Team Championship was on the line for Axiom defending against A-Town Down Under. Hot and fast, but a bit sloppy at the start. Nathan Frazier took Ataxia from Austin Theory. Grayson Waller took a high-low that included a missile dropkick. Axiom caught Waller rolling into the ring with a rear naked choke as Frazier put Theory in a guillotine. Theory accidentally swung Frazier into Waller. Then he stopped Waller from nearly clotheslining him. Waller dodged Golden Ratio, which hit Theory, then got caught with a flip-over Canadian Destroyer. Axiom followed with a Spanish Fly, and Frazier hit the Phoenix Splash to retain their titles. Surprisingly, not for Axiom's best match together, just given the talent of Theory and Waller, but nevertheless a fantastic title defense over a main roster team that sold their asses off for the champions. Lots of credit to Theory and Waller coming in and getting that much work. It obviously furthered their potential breakup on SmackDown, which absolutely needs to happen sooner than later at this juncture, unless it's a swerve into something else. Not that I want Logan Paul anywhere near WWE, but when he does return, working an actual trio with those three, it makes so much sense. And that's why I still don't know whether they're actually going to break up. Anyway, the match banged, even if I didn't necessarily think it hit all expectations. They were picking up major steam late, so if it was given more time, it probably would have been even better. I was at 3.5 stars and a B, but if you were a little bit higher, borderline 3.75 B+, then we're pretty much in the same camp about this as well. Ava backstage was fine with Lola Vice wanting to fight Jada Parker, saying it was mutual between them. Nikita Lyons interrupted, making her return, and it quickly got heated with Ava setting a match between them for next week. Lyons is now in 2 full knee braces, and as I've stated so many times, I just don't get it with her. I don't understand why so many people like her. I mean, I get certain reasons why so many people like her. I don't even get those personally. As far as I'm concerned, they got to stop trying to make Nikita Lyons happen. Nikita Lyons is not going to happen.
Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's not going to happen.
But hey, we'll see how this goes next week, and we'll take it week by week from there. Ridge Holland backstage talked some more shit about Chase U, only for Riley Osborne to attack him from behind. The expectation was a rematch between them anyway, probably happening next week. He has a full beard going, which is a good look. And you could tell that this NXT in totality felt more like a regular episode compared to Chicago last week, which felt like a PLE on TV, for lack of a better comparison. They are going back, or they're supposed to go back, I should say, to the WWE Performance Center this coming Tuesday for the next edition of NXT. But because of Hurricane Milton, which is going through Tampa across the state, which should put Orlando in its path, there's really no telling. I know that they were doing some construction inside the Performance Center, tried to get WWE to confirm to me that they're changing sets, could not get that on the record. But, they're making changes, it looks like. I know a lot of talent is stuck in St. Louis all the way until the end of this week. Friday, they're planning to travel back to Florida. So, I'm not totally sure what next week's show is going to look like internally from a booking standpoint, what talent is going to be available. That all is going to be pretty damn interesting. As far as NXT on Tuesday, the one that we just discussed, it was a loaded show. You could argue even more loaded than the Chicago episode last week, but I'm just not sure it was promoted well enough. I remembered that some WWE main roster superstars were going to be on the show. I forgot about A-Town Down Under, and I felt like more could have been done Monday on Raw to suggest that some other wrestlers would make surprise appearances. It was cool that Jay was there on top, but if you really think about the show, they had Jay, Bianca, Jade, Randy Orton, obviously, A-Town Down Under. I mean, that's a significant amount of talent. And as they kept coming out on the show, I was like, oh yeah, that's right, this is booked for the show. But as a viewer even, I just didn't necessarily remember all of it was coming. It was more loaded with main roster talent than the Chicago show was. And obviously CM Punk carried the water on that show. You don't need much more than him. But still, I thought this show could have been promoted better. And overall, I thought it was better, apples to apples, than Chicago 2 weeks ago, because it felt more like an NXT episode because of the venue. And we also just got high quality wrestling. So all in all, it was a massive success. Now, we're going to pause here before we get into breaking down AEW, and we're going to discuss the ratings from professional wrestling on Tuesday night. And these folks are immensely interesting. For NXT, it did 824,000 viewers and a 0.24 demo. Obviously a fantastic number, one of the best in years. We've talked about all that last week. But what's crazy is comparing it to last week. Last week did 895,000 viewers and a 0.26 demo. That was up against the vice presidential debate along with a bunch of sports. So as we speculated last week, it was extremely difficult to know what that rating would have done without the debate and without some of that sports competition. It's quite possible that would have hit 1 million, 0.3. Like, there was a legitimate opportunity for that to do a monster number. It was difficult to know how much 895 and 0.26 was a success. Don't get me wrong, it was seen as a massive success by the CW, but it certainly had the opportunity to be higher. For this week to come in for a non-debut episode, but also not going against the debate, even though it still went against the MLB playoffs and other sports, to do 824 and a 0.24 demo, that held up pretty damn well. That's still the second highest rating of this entire year and one of the highest dating back the last 2 years. So the debut of NXT on the CW is absolutely kicking ass. Next week will be the first normal episode. It's still going to go up against MLB playoffs and some other sports, but it'll be the first normal episode at the WWE Performance Center without a bunch of main roster talent advertised. That'll give us a real nice barometer on what this show might be able to do on a week-to-week basis on the CW. Now, this was a rare occurrence, of course, where NXT and Dynamite went head-to-head, AEW Dynamite, of course. And the reason for that is Dynamite had to move from Wednesday to Tuesday due to MLB playoffs and the NHL. I think it was a confluence of both happening at the same time. Now, last year when this happened, obviously NXT beat AEW head-to-head because it had The Undertaker and John Cena and Asuka and so on and so forth on that show. AEW also loaded up that program. WWE obviously had main roster talent on NXT, but it was certainly not at the level that it was a year ago, and it made a lot more sense because they were on the road for 2 debut episodes. Dynamite similarly did not load up this show, but it was the go-home for WrestleDream. The other difference is last year they literally went head-to-head for 2 full hours. Both had overruns. It was a whole deal, major competition. This year, Dynamite actually started at 9 p.m. So only the first hour of Dynamite went head-to-head with the second hour of NXT, and NXT doesn't have an overrun anymore. So it was really an apples-to-apples comparison for that 9 p.m. hour. Anyway, Dynamite's ratings came in at 329,000 viewers and a 0.10 demo. That makes it the lowest rated Dynamite of all time. And that includes prior preempted shows that changed night, time, channel, whatever the case might be. The prior low was 462,000 and a 0.19 demo. That was back on June 4th, 2021. So more than 3 years ago. And what's crazy about this week's number is that demo is half of the prior low demo, which is just, it's shocking. That's really the best word I can use to describe it. It is straight up shocking. Now, we talked about this last week. The Dynamite ratings, they don't matter that much anymore. AEW got its new deal with Warner Brothers Discovery. They're getting paid a ton of money. But if you're Warner and you see that kind of number for a show that was preempted one day and still on the same channel and still had a pretty decent card, you have to be concerned with what you just paid for. And I keep going back to this conversation that we had. I think we had it last week and we had it previously about AEW's TV deal and WWE's TV deal as well. I cannot imagine WWE got anywhere near maximum value for NXT when that, I know it was head to head and I know it was a different night in time, but now 2 weeks on the CW has done 824 and 895, and Dynamite the last couple of weeks has done now 329 and last week 680. So this is a show that's on a broadcast network doing clearly better ratings. Again, only for 2 weeks. It's a very short sample size. And we don't know exactly how much the CW paid. I heard it could be as much as $35 million for the life of the contract. Others are hearing 20. That's a pretty big gulf between those two numbers. Even if we put it somewhere in the middle at $27 million, that still pales in comparison to what AEW is getting paid just for Dynamite. And obviously their contract includes Dynamite, Collision, and certainly streaming, plus myriad other items that, of course, we haven't been able to fully dive into yet because we don't know all the specifics. And similarly, I've had this conversation about the WWE deal with Netflix. That includes a bunch of international rights. And WWE gave up $1 million deals with multiple TV stations in multiple countries, worldwide. I don't know that the Netflix deal was as good as WWE could have gotten. So, we kind of mentioned this last week when we talked about the AEW TV deal at the top of the show. Did Tony Khan maybe get somewhat of a sweetheart deal from WBD? It's absolutely possible that happened because the numbers that AEW is putting out on television just really do not seem to legitimize the amount of money that they got paid for their media rights. Now, maybe that'll change over time. It'll look like a good investment. Maybe Warner Brothers Discovery is banking on, future results and not the present lull that they're in. But when you combine attendance issues with ratings issues, I don't care that this changed night and time. I don't care that it went head to head with NXT for 1 hour. 329,000 viewers and a 0.1 demo for the go-home show for a pay-per-view that still had some pretty decent stuff on it. That's really bad, especially when you consider they went fully head-to-head last year. And again, I acknowledge the show was much more loaded last year. but they did go head to head, and that did 609,000 viewers and a 0.26. So nearly twice as well a year ago compared to this show. And again, that had tougher competition because NXT had John Cena and The Undertaker and Asuka, etc. So I don't know how much can actually be gleaned from the ratings this week, but I did find that to be immensely interesting. So with that said, let's go ahead and move over to AEW. The build for WrestleDream, folks, has been, pretty damn convoluted. There's a lot of matches on this card that simply do not belong on a pay-per-view, and the build for it has been immensely rushed because they've aired special TV episodes between their last pay-per-view and, of course, this pay-per-view. So we're going to discuss everything that happened across Dynamite, Collision, and Rampage that either doesn't have to do with WrestleDream or is tangentially related to WrestleDream. And then we will talk about everything on those shows that was directly related to WrestleDream on the AEW Ultimate Preview, which will, of course, conclude this show. Now, in terms of relevant matches on TV this week, you guys know we always do this math right at the top. I had 4 out of 16 matches being fully storyline relevant and valuable. That included a number one contendership. Obviously, that's 25%, which is a far cry from the 50% 2 weeks ago. And of course, nowhere near the 66% that we actually want. And for it to be that low, when this was the go-home set of episodes before a pay-per-view, it really made the 3 hours, the 5 hours of AEW television pretty difficult to watch this week. As mentioned, normally I would break all of this down with significantly great detail because Hurricane Milton is bearing down and because there is so much to discuss. I went a little bit shorter on some of the stuff this week, but we're going to get through all of it, and we will have your complete AEW WrestleDream Ultimate Preview coming up momentarily. Starting on Collision, Wheeler Yuta beat Beef in 2 minutes. Why? I have no idea. He won with cattle mutilation again, as Jon Moxley and crew watched from the crowd. Before the match, Claudio Castagnoli and Pac confronted Yuta, with Claudio allowing him to vent his frustration. When Wheeler finished, Claudio reminded that he's never steered him wrong before. He's always going to have his back. If that was true, then wouldn't they have keyed him into the heel turn before it happened? That was my take. On Dynamite, Daniel Garcia was stopped in the parking lot. He said he owed fans an explanation. He thanked Tony Khan in the ring for giving him the chance to speak before the crowd because he's not the type of guy who wants to disappear without any word. He provided no specifics, so the assumption was that fans were aware he was, 1, going to become a free agent, and 2, somehow wavering where he would work. He said he believes he's one of the best professional wrestlers in the world, so he's going to stay. Wait for it. Where the best wrestle.
I hate this. I hate this crap. Stop. Stop with the crap.
There were some light cheers and then a light AEW chant. Garcia said he's going to be a changed man so AEW could build its future on his back, and that starts with him getting gold. Then he actually managed to double catchphrase it by saying the feeling is restored. And then he went up to the ramp and on top of the stage, and one more time, because I guess he had to. He made sure everyone understood this was where the best wrestle.
I hate this. I hate this crap. Stop. Stop with the crap.
I need a better sound drop for this. I've told you guys. I got one suggestion. No offense to the person that sent it in. I didn't totally love it. If you have better sound drop suggestions for this type of situation, please send them in Jerome's at GettingOvercast on Twitter, gettingoverpod@gmail.com for email. Couple things here. First, Garcia staying in AEW. No shit. All those planted stories about WWE being horny for him, that's a real word that was used in a report. And WWE pushing hard to get him. Look, our subscribers at buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, you guys knew that was mostly bullshit. Not that WWE didn't have interest. They did, but it was nominal and only if he became available and wanted a change of scenery. Second, Garcia, he was perfectly fine on the mic here. But the fans basically had no idea what he was talking about at the beginning. The tease he gave of possibly leaving didn't really make any sense. And my Lord, how many times do we need to get identical promos like this? How many slurpings of AEW and Tony Khan need to happen? How many times does this absurd 1990s catchphrase need to be uttered? I mean, this is 100% where the big boys play now. You're going to do this on your go-home show for a pay-per-view where 2/3 of the matches have barely been built? Why not do it on the Dynamite after WrestleDream? Why not have him do it at WrestleDream in front of a crowd that will actually sell this? Didn't make any sense to me. On Rampage, Queen Aminata beat Harley Cameron in 8 minutes. Harley's random backstage interview was better than the match itself. Serena Deeb attacked after the bell with Britt Baker saving. Baker then voiced a video package on Collision saying she belongs in the women's title picture. Then she called out Mariah May saying she's tired of waiting for her opportunity. How does she or AEW figure that this makes a shred of sense? Britt literally just lost a title match to Mercedes for the secondary strap, and it was squeaky clean. How does that put her in contention for the main title? Because she came back and beat Serena on a random TV match. It would be one thing if she came back and stepped into the main title feud. But come on. On Collision, Willow Nightingale beat Trish Adora in 8 minutes. Why? No reason. Before the match, in a backstage interview, she is now apparently a full conglomeration member. Willow also told Britt to wait her turn because she's going after Mariah. After the match, Willow and Mariah had a little brawl since she was watching from the crowd. Christopher Daniels then set a number 1 contendership for Dynamite. How does Willow or AEW figure this makes a shred of sense? She literally just lost a grudge match to Chris Statlander, and that was squeaky clean. How does that put her in contention for the main title? It would be one thing if she won that match. But come on, this is just nonsensical to take 2 feud losers and make them top contenders. We'll come back to how this entire thing wrapped up. On Rampage, Chris Statlander backstage said the street fight ended an era for her and she's going back to basics on her own. She called herself a born-again Kristen. Get it? Then Camille got in her face and they basically each said EST lines like they were Bianca Belair, totally ripping her gimmick. Then Mercedes Moné walked by and called Stat a bitch, seemingly for no reason whatsoever. So let me get this straight. Not only is Stat no longer with Stokely Hathaway, she's now a babyface. This after turning on her best friend and beating her in a street fight. So Willow got absolutely no redemption on being treated like dog shit by her bestie. And the breakup with Stoke didn't even happen on TV, where he turned on her to work with another woman, or they agreed to a mutual parting of ways because they took care of business and did what they needed to do. And now we're just supposed to cheer for her because she's going up against another heel. Even beyond that, the entire point of pairing Stat and Stoke was to advance her career, to get past Willow and do that. Remember the whole idea of Willow holding her back? So she had to break free and make it on her own. Yet instead, Stat is right back in the TBS title picture. She's obviously not going to beat Mercedes for it, so that's going to be a failure. Meanwhile, Willow is once again going after the main title. Don't get it twisted. Stat is way better as a face, but there was no redemption for her. Not only with Willow, but even as an individual. And why is Willow, who again lost the feud, going after a bigger belt than Stat, who won the feud? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, there was a report, I believe, from Fightful saying the partnership of Stat and Stoke couldn't continue. So perhaps something happened backstage that made it untenable between them. That shit does happen. I'm super curious as to what it could have been, but okay, shit happens. You still have to do a far better job retconning it than this bullshit. Sorry. On Rampage, Camille beat a jobber in 20 seconds. This is her 4th month in AEW. She's had 4 total matches, all against nobodies, none longer than 3 minutes. Mercedes kept interrupting the interviewer, putting herself over and saying she's unstoppable with Camille by her side. She started doing the Bianca lines again, the EST shit, when Stat interrupted, once again calling herself born again Kristen. Are we really going with this? She also called them bitches. Really deep stuff. On Collision, Stat beat, I think, the same jobber in 40 seconds. At least she got 2 checks for literally 1 minute of total work. Monet came out saying they were impressed with her, but she's the CEO and no one disrespects her. Camille entered for a brawl where Stat straight up ignored her after landing 1 blow, only to get planted because she was distracted. Despite what I said a moment ago about Stat's character, storyline, and split, I actually have zero issue with this feud happening. The question is why the winner of a hot rivalry match is going after a secondary belt, when, as I just said, the loser is going after the main title. That is completely nonsensical. On Dynamite, the TBS and NJPW Strong titles were both on the line, but not against Stat. Mercedes defended them against Emi Sakura. There was a video package for Sakura on Collision, but absolutely no reason was created for this match happening. Monet also cut a promo that said nothing new. Mercedes ultimately won via submission, which was actually preferred compared to her new shitty finisher. She held Sakura for a further attack, only for Stat to save and boot Camille over the ropes. Standard women's match booking and post-match booking. On Collision, Undisputed Kingdom confronted the Beast Mortos, wondering why he was working with other people when they were working so well together as a team and had been trustworthy to him. He growled a bunch, grabbed his head, and obviously that's all that happened. On Collision, Lance Archer destroyed a bunch of random dudes backstage once again. Hey, Lance Archer's back. This time, he did it in the parking lot. Don Callis stopped him, asking if he was still represented by Jake Roberts. On Dynamite, Jake was back on TV in the first time in forever, as far as I know. Callis was pleased to inform they made the first ever talent trade in AEW history. Archer is now in the Don Callis family, and Roberts, he said his part of the deal would be a surprise. Now, I don't mind Archer going with Callis. That completely plays. And I like that they actually tried to make a storyline out of this and tried to make sense of it. But Roberts has been a non-factor in AEW for years now. He doesn't have a stable, right? Is he still managing the Righteous like he did for like 2 weeks? Who exactly does Callis even have to give him? Will Hobbs? Kyle Fletcher? I was left dumbfounded by this and kind of questioning, how is this going to transpire? So let's rewind a bit. On Collision, Hologram beat Action Andretti, Commander, and Nick Wayne in 11 minutes. The finish was awesome. He took Andretti down with a full airplane spin into a Blue Thunderbomb. Best match of the weekend in AEW, but that's really not saying that much because it was a pretty weak 3 hours of TV. On Dynamite, Hologram beat Commander in 12 minutes during his Dynamite debut. Roberts came on stage before Rush, Mortos, and Dralistico attacked both of them. They all held up the LFI fist, and then Roberts did the same on the stage. So Jake is now managing a lucha trio that previously formed without him, and somehow Callis had control over all of them in a trade, or he still had control of Rush, even though he hadn't been seen with him in weeks. I mean, what the fuck are we doing here? Oh yeah, the match was actually really good between Hologram and Commander. On Rampage, Deonna Purrazzo and Taya Valkyrie did an overly scripted taped promo about respect. Deonna said Taya's misstep, losing a match, was a bump in the road, and they are bound together by respect. They said respect 6 times in 60 seconds. Yes, I counted. Yes, it was dumb. On Rampage, Anna Jay backstage put herself over for being complimented by Will Ospreay for improving. That was the entire interview. On Collision, the Outrunners beat Grizzled Young Veterans in 11 minutes with victory roll following a tandem throwback vignette with FTR. Now, FTR had story with GYV. The Outrunners did not. The vignette was far better than the match. And I think it's probably time to give up on GYV being anything in AEW. The way they have been booked since debuting full-time is immensely odd. They've been treated like absolute shit. On Rampage, Orange Cassidy and Kyle O'Reilly beat Big Bill and Brian Keith in 12 plus minutes. This was part of the seemingly endless conglomeration learning tree feud. Chris Jericho and Rocky Romero got involved in the finish, with Keith taking the fall as expected. On Collision, the conglomeration beat Premier Athletes in 10 minutes. Repetitive matches with no storyline relevance is kind of wild. On Dynamite, the learning tree confronted Rocky backstage, saying conglomeration is treating him like the low guy on the food chain. All he's doing is taking beatings for his friends. It was actually a pretty damn compelling case that the heels made here. I wouldn't mind Romero going learning tree instead of conglomeration, giving him a little edge, something interesting. Not that I find him that interesting in either situation, but I would find him more interesting with the learning tree. On Collision, Hook backstage called out whoever attacked his father, saying he wanted to talk to them on Dynamite. Hook repeated this demand on Wednesday when Kip Sabian accidentally backed into him and got put up against a wall. Then the Patriarchy approached, asking if he's seen Sabian, and he lied to them, saying no. Christian Cage talked about losing Killswitch to a medical situation. We, of course, talked about that last week. I hope he gets better. And they wished him the best on the loss of his father, of course, referring to Taz. Now, we suspected Christian here last week, given he used the hook, line, and sinker in a promo. Obviously, that was not resolved in this segment. Starting to wonder if maybe Sabian attacked Taz. That way he could impress Christian. Maybe, but this was pretty much all we got, and there was no resolution on Dynamite, even though Hook had demanded it. So that takes us out of the breakdown of everything that happened across Dynamite, Collision, and Rampage that did not specifically and directly have to do with the pay-per-view. So let's move to the AEW WrestleDream Ultimate Preview. Now, what's crazy about this card is it has 12 announced segments, 11 matches, and a segment. And yet, the vast majority of it, in terms of build, has been lacking to almost non-existent. And I'm not suggesting that matches were put on the card without any relevance, like we get in TV many times. That's not the case. Every match, except for one which I just personally don't know about, at least something happened to create it. But when you talk about building a pay-per-view card, you want every match to have significant relevance, just by direct comparison, since the last show that we, talked about, WWE Bad Blood, there was only 5 matches on it, but every single thing mattered to a significant degree. That is not how I feel about AEW WrestleDream. And we're going to go through each match. And I'm just telling you off the top, I'm going to mention it numerous times. There's a lot of matches I'm going to talk about where you're going to say, that's not a TV match. That's actually on the pay-per-view. And that's exactly the point. It seems like they built up this card and threw a bunch of matches on it kind of just to hit their number, hit 10, 11, 12 matches, when in reality, as we've said numerous times, these shows only need 8 or 9 matches. You don't have to go to this extreme with all of these things that don't deserve to be on a pay-per-view. So let's go ahead. We'll break down the 11-match, 12-segment AEW WrestleDream card. At the end, we will give you a pre-show expectation grade, and we'll let you know whether we think it is worth spending $50 for WrestleDream. First, the ROH TV title is going to be on the line. Atlantis Jr. defending against Brian Cage, and this is going to be on the pre-show. Look, I watch every minute of AEW television. I don't believe either of these guys has been on screen to build this match. I assume it's something that happened in Ring of Honor. I don't know why it's on an AEW card when ROH has its own pay-per-views. I don't know about the storyline. I'm going to say Atlantis retains the title. I'm sorry, I can't give you a legitimate prediction for it. We have the Acclaimed against MXM Collection. On Rampage, Acclaimed cut a promo on MXM with Max Caster wearing the makeover jacket, saying he actually likes it. I cannot believe this is a pay-per-view match and one on the main card at that. This is a Rampage match, and they're putting it on pay-per-view. I have the Acclaimed winning. I can't imagine MXM winning unless someone debuts with them and cheats, or I can't even figure it out. Hologram is going to fight the Beast Mortos in a best 2 of 3 falls match. Now, they've obviously fought many times before, so I'm totally fine with the stipulation here, even if it's not that all of a pay-per-view match. Again, this is something you put in a key spot on maybe Collision. It would probably be the best spot for it. And this is a trend when it comes to the card, as I've been mentioning. Mortos obviously attacked Hologram at the end of the match on Dynamite, so it makes sense for this match to happen somewhere. Just WrestleDream is not really that place. That said, Mortos is super over, Hologram is getting over, and there's certainly worse matches on the card than this. I can't imagine Hologram losing his first match to a guy who never wins anything, so I have Hologram beating Mortos. I guess the curiosity is going to be whether he wins 2-0 or whether they actually split the falls before Hologram wins the third. Darby Allin is going to be fighting Brody King. How did we get here? On Collision, Darby beat Johnny TV in 8 minutes. Then Darby was frustrated. No one had taken his open challenge, so Brody came out and pounced him off the stage. Now, these two have history. But in terms of creating a non-title pay-per-view match, I mean, it's pretty damn weak. Darby later in a taped promo said he wanted to confront Brody in the ring on Dynamite, and Allin is the entire reason that King got hired by Tony Khan. Not his best promo by any means. They did a face-to-face on Dynamite with Allin reiterating he got him a job and that AEW has been great to him. Brody said Darby needs someone to save him from himself, so he freaked out and sat in the corner demanding a cannon. Tony Schiavone on commentary literally told us, this is amazing. What was amazing? They slapped each other once. Brody tried to choke him out, so Darby weakly hit him with a rock, and King bladed. I guess they added a little bit of heat here in the end, but woof. I mean, I guess they could have Brody win this and have Darby continue down a spiral where he, Sting's gone. He lost his number 1 contendership to Mox. He loses here. But to what end does that happen? I thought, maybe Darby actually joins Mox's crew, and that makes a lot of sense. And perhaps that does happen. Maybe King beats Allin and Darby joins Mox, and that all kind of comes together. But it doesn't really seem to be the direction they're going. So I have Darby, getting a dub back and beating Brody. I think they've been promoting this as Darby having never beat him one-on-one before, so that's even more reason why I think Allen wins this match. The Ring of Honor Championship is going to be on the line. Mark Briscoe defending against Chris Jericho. Obviously, this did get billed 2 weeks ago, even though it was kind of random. Jericho wants to be the Nueve instead of the Ocho. I'm going to assume that they do a go-home segment on Collision because they didn't really do much of anything on Dynamite. Briscoe backstage was still angry about Jericho using his brother's name, but that was really it. I cannot imagine Jericho mentioning his brother and then beating Mark for the ROH title when that is the last thing that Jericho needs, another championship, and the last thing Briscoe needs to lose to Jericho. Beating Jericho would be a feather in Briscoe's cap, as he kind of said last week. That does make a lot of sense. So I have Briscoe, beating Jericho here. I'm okay with this being on the pay-per-view. It should be a low card. Instead, we're talking about it like 1/3 of the way through this breakdown. Jay White is going to fight Hangman Page. On Dynamite, White beat a jobber in 3 minutes. Then he cut a promo at Page saying he wants a long overdue rematch with Hangman so he can get back on track toward the AEW title. Passionate promo from Jay. Probably one of the best parts of Dynamite, if we're being honest, even though not much happened in it. What's interesting is this is a sneaky underdog for match of the night, assuming it gets the time it deserves. And this absolutely, by the way, does deserve to be on the pay-per-view, not just because of quality of match, but they did reignite an old storyline. So it's kind of tough to book this, though, because Jay just came back, but Hangman is coming off beating Swerve, destroying Swerve. Hangman has lost multiple times this year, both in big and not so big matches. White returning and taking a big fat L really hurts him unless it's protected. So maybe Hangman cheats to win or something like that in the end. That is the only reason I would say that this probably should not be on the card, because this is a legitimate situation where neither guy should lose. It doesn't make sense for either of them to take an L. I guess it would make a little bit more sense for Jay to do it, like with Hangman cheating or doing something dastardly, because Jay is a babyface and could easily bounce back from it. But if you have Hangman beat Jay, and he already beat Swerve, then he really should be number one contender for the AEW title. But the problem is a heel might be walking out with the championship from WrestleDream. So how exactly does that play? That is for us to find out. My prediction for this segment will be Hangman beating White. The tag team championships will be on the line. The Young Bucks defending against Private Party. How did we get here? A lot of stuff happened. On Rampage, Katsuyori Shibata and Private Party beat the Elite in 15 minutes. The Young Bucks did the draping double stomp catch powerbomb spot again. Private Party did the assisted Canadian Destroyer spot again, plus gin and juice for a broken fall. The Bucks hit EVP trigger, but TK Driver got interrupted for an O'Connor roll, upset victory. And Stokely is now interested in managing them randomly. It was the best match on Rampage, but that's not really saying that much. On Collision, Private Party beat House of Black and Top Flight in a triple threat number one contendership. They won with gin and juice. It was actually somewhat depressing seeing Malachi Black and Buddy Matthews be involved in something as irrelevant as this. On Dynamite, Stoke made his pitch to be their manager. They denied him since he's an opportunist trying to get with them when they're number one contenders, not when they actually need him. The Top Flight crew, no longer wearing their stupid shit, but now in all black, so they were frustrating at losing the number one contendership. Andretti snapped on them. Lila Gray told him that he's the problem, and they all went in different directions. His acting was awful. And what was actually the most notable about this was Layla referring to him as Action, which just made me laugh because that's such an odd first name for someone to have. Imagine, I'm trying to think of an example, calling Big Bronson Reed Big. Hey, Big, are you ready for your match tonight? It was just so weird to hear him called Action. Now, when we talk about lacking storytelling and flawed AEW booking logic, this match is the paradigm. Just rewinding a couple of weeks, Private Party were teaming with Commander for no reason and got absolutely murdered twice by Mox's crew. I mean, straight up destroyed. Isaiah Cassidy, I believe, even had his hand presumably broken with a hammer. He wore a cast or something on it the next time we saw him. Now, literally 2 weeks later, the cast is gone. Private Party is trying to cash in on a promise to win the tag team titles before the end of the year. They team with Shibata because he's fighting Jack Perry, and they win a randomly thrown together number one contendership against a Top Flight team that has no right contending for anything, and House of Black, which has been irrelevant for months. So now, on a pay-per-view, you're being asked to pay $50 for, mind you. We're getting Bucks Party, which I wouldn't even consider to be a Dynamite main event in 2024. This is a team that has not grown one iota since debuting and actually upsetting the Bucks 5 years ago. They have no fan momentum. And let me remind you, they just got absolutely murked twice in the last month. These are the two dudes that are the number one contenders. You know who had a greater claim to actually being in this match? Anybody from the conglomeration, which has been winning consistently on television. Even the Outrunners, simply due to fan sentiment, you could make an argument. Put them on the pay-per-view. Give them a title match. People would go crazy for it. Instead, we're getting the Bucks and Private Party in 2024. This is straight up bad booking. I have the Bucks retaining the titles. The TNT Championship, I mentioned Perry against Shibata. Jack on Dynamite basically said Shibata is big downstairs. I mean, okay. And that he wanted to fight the version of Shibata who is violent and almost killed himself in the ring. This is another TV quality match on the pay-per-view. Perry's going to retain the title, beat Shibata, get a feather in his cap, I guess. I'm sure it'll be a good match, but it just hasn't been built anywhere near legitimately enough to happen on a pay-per-view. Swerve Strickland is going to return at this show. On Dynamite, there was a video package previewing his return. He was working out with that dude we saw on TV one time that was overlaid with MVP's promo from 2 weeks ago. MVP and Shelton Benjamin watched it backstage. I guess they were proud of the production quality or something. I'm sure Swerve is going to get attacked by a debuting Bobby Lashley. Otherwise, there is no reason whatsoever to do this on the pay-per-view. He'll tease going with MVP, ultimately deny. Lashley attacks him, kills him, and that will be a hot feud, Lashley and Swerve, don't get me wrong. And I am excited to get Lashley in AEW. That's a positive as well. I'm just saying it's pretty formulaic and seems predictable. The women's championship will be on the line. Mariah May defending against Willow Nightingale. So how did we get from Willow and Britt both wanting title matches to Willow actually getting it? On Dynamite, Willow beat Jamie Hayter, Nyla Rose, and Saraya in a number one contendership because Baker was unable to make Dynamite due to Hurricane Milton. Willow put Saraya through a table and covered both her and Harley, who, by the way, was not in the match. She covered them simultaneously for the win. Penelope Ford returned during this to hit Hayter with a chair. She chased her off rather than focus on the opportunity to go after the women's championship, which of course is dumb babyface shit. This was awful. Mariah headbutted Willow on the stage and beat her with the strap. Nightingale then pounced her during an interview and cut a promo into the camera instead of to May, who was dead on the ground. I loved the pounce. I actually liked both attacks better than the match itself. So Mariah and Willow, this is going to be a really good match for the women's championship. No question about it. I see no world in which Willow beats Mariah before Toni Storm comes back. We've talked about this. It seems like they're just delaying the inevitable with Toni. She's apparently doing an excursion over in Japan. I don't know when that ends. Whenever it does, I would expect her to attack Mariah. If it's already over, she'll attack her after the title retention here. And if it's not already over, then May just wins and kind of moves on. International Championship is going to be on the line. Will Ospreay defending against Ricochet and Konosuke Takeshita in a triple threat. On Dynamite, Ospreay was angry about Takeshita interfering in the Ricochet match last week. Callis came out trying to remind him of the good times, but Ospreay asked if Callis ordered the code red. He tried to avoid answering, only to admit it, yes, was him. He said he did it out of frustration because Ospreay won't take his advice. It got heated even further between them. Callis said that he threw the best wrestler in the world, Kenny Omega, away for Ospreay, and now he's going to have to do the same to Ospreay for Takeshita. So Ospreay ended their relationship. I think it was pretty clear that you guys weren't going to be working together anymore, Will. And Callis slapped him across the face. So Ospreay threw him and Takeshita attacked. Kyle Fletcher tried to calm things. That only led to Takeshita getting up on Ospreay. Callis handed Fletcher a screwdriver. He refused to lose it and then threatened Callis when he put his hands on him. Fletcher ultimately left the ring. Takeshita and Callis beat the shit out of Ospreay. Fletcher didn't save. Ricochet came down, ran past Fletcher, saved, and that brings us into the match. This is actually the least predictable match on the entire card, at least as far as I'm concerned. You can say that the main event is 50-50, and I think that's fair, but I just don't necessarily know what they're going to do here. Going with a triple threat would be a great way to put the international title on Takeshita without him beating Ospreay. You could have Takeshita pin Ricochet. You could have Ricochet, theoretically, pin Takeshita, win the international title without Ospreay losing it and without their feud having a defined winner. That makes sense. You could also have Ospreay pin Takeshita to retain the title without finishing the Ospreay Ricochet feud, which clearly you want to build up going forward. I just don't know what direction they're going to go. There's so many different options here. I do believe that Takeshita needs a title. I think it makes the most sense for him to take the Continental Championship from Kazuchika Okada, and they've been teasing that feud. The problem is both of them are heels, and how do you get that into a heel-face dynamic where that match makes sense. Maybe I'm wrong and I'm thinking about this incorrectly, but I just have Ospreay retaining the title. He had just lost it to MJF and just won it back at All In. I don't think it makes sense to drop it again. So Ospreay retains in this match, and I'll say that he pins Takeshita circumstantially because Ricochet gets a lot of offense. I think that's the wrong decision, but I don't know which of these guys can lose and have it be the right decision, honestly. So let's move to the AEW Championship. This, of course, will be the main event. Bryan Danielson defending against Jon Moxley. And if Danielson loses, the next match he loses is the gimmick. He will be forced to retire from full-time competition. Mox did the cold open to Dynamite, saying Danielson has been trying to kamikaze himself for the last 2 years, and no one wants his blood on their hands, so it comes down to him. He also said that Bryan, when in his element, brings the American Dragon to life, but he's never been comfortable with that part of himself. Mox promised he'd make Bryan embrace his dark side and then said a bunch of nothing at the end. He said he hopes Danielson one day understands it has to be this way. Danielson later cut a promo with basically the worst audio possible, saying he and Yuta would run through the old BCC. The main event of Dynamite, Danielson and Yuta against Claudio and Pac. There were some storytelling elements in here. I'm going to leave them out just due to time constraints getting the show up. Pac had a perfect 450 splash, ultimately got submitted by Bryan as Wheeler and Claudio argued on the ring apron. Danielson went after Mox. They battled all the way backstage. That left Yuta by himself. Marina Shafir got shots on Wheeler in the ring. He got triple teamed. Claudio, who, don't forget, we talked about this earlier, said he always had his back, would always protect him, so on, ultimately took a hammer and drove it into his stomach 3 times. Bryan eventually came out fighting Mox back to the ring. He repelled Mox out of the ring, and he just stood there doing the yes chant as Wheeler was lying on the ground, basically dead with his arm out, trying to get Bryan's help. Eventually, at the very end of Dynamite, Bryan turned around, lifted him up, and so on. Now, we thought the Wheeler heel turn might come in this match, but clearly it's going to happen at WrestleDream, or at least that's the tease that we got at the end of Dynamite. I wish it was a little bit more subtle, but it was kind of beating us over the head with the closing shot, unless, again, it's a total swerve. Bryan was more concerned with getting his shots on Mox than he was protecting the guy who had his back and actually stood up to this crew the entire time. The guy who, put his body on the line for him in this spot. So my guess is we get a schmoz of some kind where the heels come out, Yuta saves, but he actually low blows Danielson, and Mox ends up taking the title, retiring Danielson full time. And then at some point, Bryan returns and they circle back to this. Even if that's not the finish, I don't exactly know how you have Danielson retain over this version of the Mox character with all of the momentum he has behind him, all of the people that he has getting his back. And by the way, Mox is a full heel. So even though in the past it would be quote unquote, we're the best wrestle, let's go clean and put on a great match. Here, if he wins in a dastardly way and uses that to retire Danielson while stealing the AEW title, that does make a lot of sense for his character. His gimmick is basically, I'm going to take over this company and start a war by any means necessary. And if you mean that, then you're going to have Claudio and Pac run down. You're going to turn Wheeler and you're going to beat Bryan and take the title. Now, we talked about who would be the best person to, retire Danielson as a full-time performer. I thought it was Hangman Page, especially coming out of him beating Swerve. Hangman's being kept away from the title. Also, there's only 2 major shows left in 2024 after this, and I really do not believe Bryan is going to be holding this title into 2025. Those shows are Full Gear and World's End. In theory, having Bryan lose at Full Gear would be bigger than at WrestleDream because Full Gear is one of the tentpole AEW shows every year. That said, this is in Tacoma, Washington, and if you want to maximize the heat on Mox or on anyone who's taking the title off of him and retiring him as a full-time competitor, you do it in this spot. So, yeah, my prediction is for Mox to beat Bryan. I would not be surprised if it goes the other way and Danielson somehow retains. But everything is pointing to Mox being the next AEW champion. I believe it would be his 4th reign, maybe his 3rd, and being the most decorated AEW champion coming out of this. And whatever storyline that they're trying to tell, it has been the most important thing on television over the last month. And if you're going to continue that, Mox has to come out as champion. So I have Mox beating Bryan and winning the title. I think this is now the 3rd time that I've said that. So, wrapping up the preview here of AEW WrestleDream. Again, there's 2 questions that we need to answer. One, what is the pre-show expectation grade? And two, is this worth the $50 for the pay-per-view? Let's start with the expectation grade. As always with AEW, even when the storytelling and building of the card leaves a lot to be desired, there are a number of high-quality matches where you're going to come out of this and saying, man, that was a really, really entertaining show. Bryan and Mox, obviously. Ospreay, Ricochet, and Takeshita, no doubt. Mariah and Willow, definitely up there. And then Jay and Hangman. Those are the matches I care about on this card. Unfortunately, those are only half of the matches on the card. And yeah, Hologram Mortis will be good, but I don't give a single shit about it. And then when you break it down even further, of the matches I said I really cared about that I thought would be high quality wrestling, how many of them would I purchase a pay-per-view to watch? Jay White and Hangman Page, absolutely. Ospreay, Ricochet, and Takeshita, yes. Danielson and Moxley, yes. So 3 out of 12 matches on this card, I would pay money to see. And of those 3, the only one I actually care about in terms of storyline relevance is Bryan and Mox. So in terms of a pre-show expectation grade here, I know the wrestling is going to be better than the booking, but I'm going with a B+ coming in. I'll call it an 89 out of 100. So it can easily jump to an A- by slightly exceeding expectations, but there's certainly a floor of a B that exists, or I guess technically a B- because the card isn't that great. That exists where it can go. And when it comes to spending $50 on this pay-per-view, I think for the first time ever in AEW history, I'm going to say no. If I was a regular fan and not covering it and didn't have the podcast, I would certainly go out and seek individual matches from the show and results, and I'd want to know what happened. But would I spend $50 on this show after having just consecutively purchased All Out and All In, knowing that Full Gear is coming up, knowing that World's End might have a great card at the end of the year? I mean, AEW is asking for a lot of money for these shows, and I do not feel that the build to it across Dynamite, Collision, and Rampage has been anywhere near deserving of $50 from fans. Maybe you'll feel differently once we get once we get the buy rate. It's not publicly released, it gets leaked, and who knows how accurate it is. When that buy rate does come out, if it comes out, we'll see if people disagree with me. You know, usually they hit easy 6 figures, 100, 120. I think their high is like 150 or something for a normal show. If they're able to do that number, then shut my mouth and fans will just buy whatever AEW is selling when it comes to pay-per-views. But given it's football season and the build wasn't that great, I would not be surprised if this has a lower buy rate than usual. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't know that number because no one decides to leak it because it's not that great. We will find out about all of that next week. A reminder, of course, Saturday night, we will have your AEW WrestleDream Instant Analysis podcast. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at Getting Overcast so you know when that drops, but also so you can send in questions and comments for the show. You can learn about episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. And so you can vote in our pre- and post-show polls before and after AEW WrestleDream. On the way out, allow me to hit you with some additional reminders. First, of course, that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
It's all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we'll read it right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. I already told you, follow us on Twitter as well, both at Getting Overcast. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Over head. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover, sign up. You will get the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reaction audio to every major TV show, and exclusive news and analysis on Fridays. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We will be back on Saturday with your AEW WrestleDream instant analysis, and then next Tuesday with your next WWE show. This is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.